Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bat Around. I'm your host, Paul Valley, and joining me today, my good friend, Andrew Stetka. Andrew, good morning, man. Thank you so much for joining us. You're joining us from Arizona, correct?
I am indeed. It's a pleasure, Paul. How's it going this morning?
Going well. Epic World Series. One of the best all-time World Series I've ever seen. Just absolutely incredible. Game 7 was just a dream scenario, unless you're a Blue Jays fan. We're gonna get into all of that and much more here on the Bat Around. But first, got to pay some bills. Today's show is brought to you by Help My Gambling Problem. If you or a loved one has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit helpmygamblingproblem.org for free confidential services. That's 1-800-GAMBLER or helpmygamblingproblem.org for free confidential services. And shameless plug here for Andrew. PressBox's Project Game Day continues next week following Ravens-Vikings with your hosts Glenn Clark and Rita Hubbard and special guest Ken Zales and Andrew Stetka. Also, former Ravens linebacker Tyus Bowser. You can watch the show on Facebook, YouTube, or PressBoxOnline.com/Game Day. Project Game Day is brought to you by 1-800-GAMBLER, Costa Sin, Game Day Men's Health, and Live Casino and Hotel. Andrew, I'm assuming that you were. Well, first up, let me say this: I barely watched last year's World Series. I could not bring myself to root for the Dodgers. Could not bring myself to root for the Yankees. I guess last year I was rooting for the Dodgers because I like Freddie Freeman, I like Mookie Betts, I like Teoscar Hernandez. It's gonna sound funny. I am indifferent towards Shohei Ohtani. Like I will acknowledge and agree he is the greatest baseball player of all time. Apologies to Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds. I think that it's like if I were to say he's not, it'd be like saying Tom Brady isn't the greatest quarterback of all time. And I'm not about to sit here and have that argument, right? So
right, sure.
yeah, so last year I tuned in, but barely. Like I didn't see Freddie Freeman's walk-off grand slam in Game 1 live. I saw the highlights of it and all that. And when I saw that it was the Blue Jays taking on the Dodgers for this year's World Series, I tweeted out or posted out on X, just like last year, I'm not really going to watch this World Series because I don't want either team to win. I am so glad that was a lie.
Yes.
I'm so glad that was a lie because what an epic World Series. I mean, you go into Game 1, and I think we all agree that we figured that the Dodgers were probably going to win. The richest team in baseball with the best roster in baseball. Despite the injuries, they have like 8 aces in their rotation. We knew that they were going to win this World Series, but then the Blue Jays come out and punch them in the mouth in Game 1. They win that game 11-4, and you're thinking, oh, we might have a series on our hands, and we certainly did. Just overall, your take on the World Series and what you saw and what you thought of it.
I mean, look, without getting into recency bias and everything, you said it. It's one of, if not the best World Series we've ever witnessed. Now, look, there's been a lot of great World Series over the year. My mind always goes back to 2001 when the Diamondbacks defeated the Yankees on Luis Gonzalez's walk-off. It was Mariano Rivera. It had all of the kind of ingredients that you want. Of course, it came in the aftermath of 9/11 too, so there was just that little bit of added something to that World Series. But this one had everything as well. I mean, all the drama you could want, all the different superstar players, and then also just the role guys who stepped up in big ways. It had a little bit of every single ingredient to make it just an absolute classic. And I'm to you where last year, obviously, Yankees, Dodgers, as an Orioles fan, you're not going to be enjoying a Yankees-Dodgers World Series in any respect. And honestly, how are you going to enjoy a Blue Jays-Dodgers World Series much better than that? It's tough, but I was in a similar boat to you in the sense that I wasn't super excited to watch, but the games were on. I was going to pop them on. I was at least going to have some interest. But this World Series in particular drew me in more than just a random World Series has in years past. Not only because of what you're talking about, players like Shohei Ohtani, but also veteran players. I mean, Clayton Kershaw getting another ring. Max Scherzer trying to get another ring. We got to witness, again, as Orioles fans, Kevin Gausman going out there and pitching his butt off to try and win a ring. There were just so many different elements to this World Series that were able to draw me in that it really was fascinating. And obviously it paid off because if you're just a fan of baseball, like you and I both are, I mean, look, I consider myself a fan of the Orioles, even more so than a fan of baseball at this point in my life. But I'm still a fan of the game, and I still want to see greatness within the game. And I think we got to see it over the course of 7, really more than 7 games when you think about how many innings were played in this World Series. It was something to behold for sure.
Oh, it was a hell of a World Series. And the funny thing is, you look at the games that were decided, 3-1, 5-4, 6-5, and it's like 18 innings, 11 innings, and it's so exciting. The other 4 games were decided by 4 runs or more, right? Mm-hmm. So game 1, it's 11-4. Then game 3, it's 6-1. Game 4, it's 6-2. You know what I mean? Like, so you feel really good about the Blue Jays because they win 11-4, and then the next game is the Dodgers go and they win 6-1, and then game 3 is that epic 18-inning game, and then the Dodgers go out and they win. Or I'm sorry, the Blue Jays go out and they win game 4 6-1, and they win game 5 6-2, or vice versa. And so it's like then you're feeling really good about the Blue Jays because hey, they've got like 3 blowout wins kind of in the first 5 games of this series, and now they're coming home to the Rogers Center, and then the Dodgers do what the Dodgers do. They win game 6, they win game 7, and game 7 was an all-timer. Oh my goodness. You go the Blue Jays get out in front 4-1. You go to the top of the 9th, and you've got Jeff Hoffman, and Orioles fans are jumping up and down at what happened with Jeff Hoffman there because we all remember that he failed a physical with the Braves. He signs with the Orioles, fails a physical with the Orioles, then signs with the Blue Jays, gets a save against the Orioles in that first or second series of the season, and blows the dugout a kiss as he's walking off the field, right? And we're sitting there and we're like, man, F you. F you. And then he pitches like a 4.5 ERA in the regular season. He blows seven saves. He was pretty bad at one point during the mid-season part of the year. And then he gets in the playoffs and he's nails. He's absolutely dominant in the postseason. But Miguel Rojas on the 7-pitch at bat takes him deep. This is a guy who hit like 4 home runs in the regular season. He hadn't homered off a right-hander all season. And he homers in the top of the 9th of game 7 with the Blue Jays clinging to a 1-run lead to tie that ball game. Just an absolutely unbelievable moment for the Dodgers and for baseball as a whole. But then you look at Toronto and how devastating game 7 was for them because they have that 4-1 lead. They have the 4-3 lead in the top of the 9th. They get the bases loaded with 1 out in the bottom of the 9th. And then you have a play at the plate where Miguel Rojas, the hero from the top half, he makes that backhanded step, but then loses his balance. And you can see when they slow it down, the look on his face, like there wasn't a look of worry. It was a look of get this throw off, right? And he gets the throw off. The catcher, Will Smith, he catches the ball, but his foot comes off the plate. Then it comes back down on the plate in a nanosecond.
So close.
Oh, my gosh. Just a hair ahead of the slide. Was it Barger who was sliding in? Just ahead of the base runner. So many different things happened on that play that could have won the World Series for the Blue Jays, and they went the Dodgers' way. And then the next batter, Ernie Clement, 30 hits in the postseason, and he hits a shot into left center field. And Kike was playing in. He's running back, and he's in no man's land. He's going to have to make this miraculous over the shoulder catch. And here comes Andy Pages, who was put into the game as a defensive replacement in that very inning by Dave Roberts. And people can hate on Dave Roberts all they want. I'm not his biggest fan. But to bring him in because of the arm strength, and to have that guy come in and make a season-saving catch, leaping up, running over Kike to save the game and take it to extra innings. What a play and what a 9th inning.
There were so many moments, not only in the entire series, obviously with the one game going 18 innings, which I somehow managed to stay awake for. But
Jesus, you stayed up for that whole game?
Oh yeah. Well, it's a little easy. It's a little easier being on the West Coast as well, of course. But still, that was late for me even. And there were so many moments in throughout the whole series, but especially in Game 7. I'm sitting last night watching the game, and my wife and I are watching, and there were so many moments where my mouth just was agape with, did that just happen? Mm-hmm. And so many moments where you're almost covering your face because you don't want to watch. And I don't have a dog in the fight here. It was just that intense and that much drama involved in this game. There were so many of those moments, like you're talking about, Will Smith's foot coming off the plate, the play in left center field, the home runs, the strikeouts. There were just so many moments where the thing could have turned on an absolute dime. I mean, there was the one moment, obviously, that ended the game and the series where one swing could win that game for the Blue Jays, but one ground ball, I mean, Joe Davis said on the broadcast, one ground ball wins, played properly and with a double play wins the series for the Dodgers. You don't get that a lot in the game of baseball, where one pitch can win it for either team. And
Incredible.
That was just the amount of drama that was built up in that was really something, like I said earlier, it was something to behold. And it's something that, us as baseball fans are going to remember for the rest of our lives.
Oh, it was just an incredible series to watch, an incredible way for Game 7 to unfold and play out. And you mentioned it. It's the bottom of the 11th now. Sir Anthony Dominguez, former Oriole. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting over the flu. It's Sir Anthony Dominguez on the mound in the top of the 11th, and he gives up that home run to Will Smith, and it's just like, oh, the Dodgers just took their first lead of the entire game, and they might win this World Series. But then the Blue Jays immediately get first and third with one out, and there's like 4 batters in that Toronto Blue Jays lineup that you want up in a moment where they can tie or win the game for you. And Alejandro Kirk is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But he also, now including the regular season and postseason, had 17 double plays grounded into this season. And sure enough, it's like he's either going to hit a line drive into right field for a base hit to bring this run home, or he's going to hit a hard ground ball to shortstop for a game-ending double play. And he hit it right at the shortstop, Mookie Betts, who took it to the bag himself, throws the first for double play.
And it shouldn't be understated too how tough of a play that is for Betts to make, because he kind of has to charge the ball and then run back to second base. The angle that he has to take there, it's a wild play, knowing that you have to get to there or the game is going to be tied up.
Right.
A really, really important play by, obviously, I mean, look, we can all say what we want about Mookie Betts. He's a former Red Sox. I get it. But like, what a ball player too. And what a play to make in that spot with the pressure on you.
Yeah, and the ability for him to go from being a center fielder to being a right fielder to being a second baseman to being a shortstop, like this is his first year being a shortstop, and he makes the series clinching double play at the end of the game. And kudos to Mookie for knowing his base runner, not hurrying himself, understanding that, look, if I field this ball cleanly, I just have to run to the bag and make a solid throw because I've got one of the slowest runners in the league going down the baseline, that internal clock. And, professional athletes have to have that to be successful at what they do. You don't get there without that. And, a big shout out to Mookie Betts for just understanding the moment in the game and not, you or I playing in that situation. Oh my God, I have a chance to make the series clinching double play, and then you throw it into the stands. You know what I mean? For Mookie to field that ground ball, step on that bag, and just make that throw to the chest at first base to Freddie Freeman to win that World Series. Just an epic World Series. I'm so glad that I didn't live up to what I said, and I actually ended up watching most of the games in the series. And, man, I'm so glad I got to watch this postseason. This was one of the best postseasons I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, there were so many games that turned on a dime because of one little thing. One little thing went wrong, one little thing went right. It really was. There were so many games that just went down to the wire, and I didn't expect myself to be watching as much of the baseball postseason for obvious reasons. The Orioles aren't involved. I think all of us, for the most part, watching the Orioles season the way that it played out, kind of checked out a little bit toward the end of the season. But then when the playoffs ramp back up, you kind of want to get back into it. You want to see who's involved. And obviously you said it at the start of the show, everyone expected the Dodgers to win this series. They were the favorites coming into not only the postseason, but the season. I mean, they were the overwhelming favorites to repeat as World Series champions, the first time that that's been done since the early 2000s as well. And I caution people, because I know there's this thought about, it's going to be the Dodgers. But the Blue Jays did push this team to the brink, and they showed you that it can't, I don't care how much money you spend. I don't care how, the luxury tax, all that. You can talk about it all. And I know there's big conversations about the Dodgers ruining baseball because of all the money that they spend, but it can be done. You can go out and win games, and I know that Toronto, it's not like Toronto is some small market ball club either. They spent money as well, but you can go out and win games and build a team. And the Dodgers have done that, obviously through the sheer force of their spending, but also through getting the right guys for the right moments. And they showed that throughout the postseason.
Right. It's not just throwing. You could go out and they could have thrown a ton of money at every player out there. And it feels like they did. Right. But they knew to get the players that would mesh the best with their roster. Now, Shohei, you don't care about his personality. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread on the baseball field. So you're going to go sign him. But Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Teoscar Hernandez, these are just likable guys in the game of baseball. It's not like they're going out there and signing, Jose Bautista back in the day, just some jerk who can hit 40 home runs, but, might not mesh well with the clubhouse, So I'm not going to get into the whole ruining baseball thing because really every owner can spend money if they really want to. They choose not to. And the Orioles, they have one of the richest ownership groups in all of baseball who can spend a ton of money if they want to. They're one of the top revenue teams in the sport. It's a matter of what makes the most sense. And we can talk about that all off season. Today we're going to celebrate the World Series being over, an epic World Series, an epic postseason run by all teams involved. I thought the Mariners were going to represent the American League in the World Series. Like that lineup, 6 guys with 20 or more home runs, 4 guys with 30 or more, 2 guys with just about 50 each. If you and Cal Raleigh 60, and then that rotation and a lockdown closer. I thought they had it, and the Blue Jays just took it to them,
Well, the pitching is the difference there. And that's, we'll get back to talking about what do you need to build a team. Look at what the Dodgers threw out there just in game 7 alone. They threw out their entire starting pitching rotation to get the job done in that game. The Mariners have pitching in spades. I mean, that's obviously what they built their team around. And then the bats produced for them what was one of their best seasons ever, obviously. But you're right. It comes down to building that roster. And the teams that we saw toward the end of the postseason here built their roster in the right way. And the Mariners, it's interesting you bring them up because they're a team that's gotten a lot of flack over the last few seasons about the way that roster was built. They were really only built through pitching, did not have much offense. But you see when it clicks for a team and when they're able to get things going and make a run like this, you can see how it can kind of galvanize an entire organization. Right. And I'm obviously not a Mariners fan, but to watch that and to see a team that's never been to the World Series, I agree with you. I thought that they were going to get past the Blue Jays. Now, would they have been able to put up the fight that the Blue Jays did against the Dodgers? I don't know the answer to that question. We'll never know, but it was cool to see them make that run after so many years of just coming up well short, I guess, is the nice way to put it. Right. When all they really had was pitching, it was nice to see them put it together and make that run. And hopefully that's a team that, you like to see a team have that kind of success and then build upon it. And hopefully for their sake, that's something that they can do.
Yeah. And I think we were all rooting for a Mariners Brewers World Series, because then you're going to have a first time World Series champion, no matter what. It's just, the Brewers, they kind of do this every year where they somehow, despite having a less than roster or what seems like a less than roster, find a way to just beat the brakes off of everybody, make it into the postseason. And they got to the NLCS, but then put up no fight against the Dodgers. Would they lose that series? Did they get swept or was it 4-1?
I think it was 4-1.
Yeah. So they go out there against.
After watching these 7 World Series games, my brain has gone out the window. Right. But I think so, yeah.
But and so like it would have been cool to see Mariners Brewers. Maybe it wouldn't have had the same viewership, but we would have had a first time champion, which would have been cool. But and look, I am by no stretch a Blue Jays fan, but I found myself rooting for the Blue Jays because they haven't won it in over 30 years, and it's there is something to be said for the championship being in your division and then having that much more to fight for next year. And I like Vladdy. I like Bo Bichette. These guys are fun players. It's not the 2010s Blue Jays where it's like, right, man, I just hate Bautista so much. You know what I mean? And I hate Encarnacion. They're not that team. It's some likable guys who happen to be in our division. So happy to watch that World Series, root for the Blue Jays. Now we get back to rooting for the Orioles and what they're going to be doing this off season. Before we get into that, Today's show brought to you by Game Day Men's Health. If you're feeling sluggish, unfocused, or not like yourself, it could be low testosterone. Game Day Men's Health, they specialize in testosterone replacement therapy to help men boost energy, improve mood, and regain confidence. Our treatments, including testosterone cypionate, are safe, natural, and tailored to fit your lifestyle with weekly injections or pellet therapy. You can call Game Day Men's Health at 3 different locations: Owings Mills at 443-264-4454, Columbia at 443-266-3505, or Frederick at 240-931-3717, or visit GameDayMen'sHealth.com and ask them about a complimentary testosterone test today. Kind of bearing. Oh, one thing I do want to mention before we jump into the Orioles stuff: Yoshinobu Yamamoto with an all-time World Series. His first start in the World Series, a complete game, 1-run performance to pick up the victory. Game 6, he goes 6 innings, allows 1 run on 96 pitches. And then Game 7, 2/3, picks up the win in relief, allowing no runs, 2 2/3 innings. He's the World Series MVP, going 3-0 in that series. What an all-time performance by Yamamoto for the Dodgers.
I mean, I immediately thought of Randy Johnson going back to the 2001 World Series, who did something similar after starting and winning Game 6, coming on in relief in Game 7. Obviously, we as Orioles fans, we got a little bit of a unique view of Yamamoto earlier this season with the Jackson Holiday homer and the no-hitter that he took into the 9th and all of that. This performance was incredible. When he was warming up for Game 7 to come on, I was thinking, there's no way after throwing 96 pitches the day before that he's going to be able to come on and get outs in this game. And sure enough, he did. It's a testament to, it's an interesting conversation to have about pitching these days too, overworking guys and all the conversation about arm injuries and everything. But there's something about certain pitchers who thrive on throwing a lot, and not just throwing a lot, but throwing the ball and learning how to pitch rather than throw it.
Right.
And that's what I think we're seeing a lot out of some of these pitchers who are able to do this, like Yamamoto. He's a pitcher. He's not a thrower. He's going to go out there and he's still going to give you mid-90s, upper 90s stuff. He's going to have great stuff, but he knows how to locate. He knows when to dial back with off-speed stuff. It's just, it was a magnificent performance that, we can bring up all the homers and the unsung heroes. He's not an unsung hero. He was the hero. Obviously, he won the MVP award. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it does have to be mentioned how just incredible of a performance that really was.
Well, and if you were just a casual fan who happened to tune in because it was on, because you're seeing social media and everybody's talking about it, and you just see Yamamoto, and you don't know that he threw 96 pitches the day before, you would have thought, I mean, he was brilliant. He was brilliant last night. You would have thought that he hadn't pitched in a week,
Right.
that he was just coming out there. The stuff was just as nasty. He just looked so dominant last night and throughout the entire series. It's an all-time performance.
Well, and to your point, if you're a casual fan and also don't recognize how hard it is to go out and throw 96 pitches one day and then come back and perform the next day, I mean, his arm, I can't imagine what your arm would feel like in that situation. It's just like being able to do something like that and perform at the highest level. All kudos to him. That's just a remarkable performance. To put your arm and your body on the line like that is really something.
So I'll tell you that I used to play down in Florida in the Roy Hobbs World Series, and one year we started the tournament 0-3, and then we went on this run and we won 5 straight games to get to the last day, where we had an opportunity. If we won the first game of the first game, we would then play in the championship in the second game. I started the first game and I pitched 4 innings, allowed 1 run. We ended up winning that game. And my manager comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, I need you to start game 2." And I went out there and I started game 2. Andrew, I could not throw the ball over the plate.
Yeah, it
was the same day, and I'd only thrown 4 innings. I couldn't throw the ball over the plate. And I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not comparing myself, but it's the only thing that I can think of as to how to compare how difficult it is just to do something like that. I could barely get the ball over the plate. I didn't get a single person out in that second game, and I had just thrown 2 hours prior. This guy threw 96 pitches the day before, and he comes out there and he dominates one of the best lineups in all of baseball for 2 2/3 innings to help his team win the World Series. Just an incredible performance by Yamamoto. The Orioles, hoping their performance this offseason is incredible. They absolutely need it to be. And it seems like, Andrew, they are off to a good start as they've hired their new manager. October 27th, the Orioles announced that Craig Albernaz will take over as their 21st manager in franchise history. A little bit of background here on Albernaz. He just turned 43 on Thursday. He served as the associate manager for the Cleveland Guardians in 2025. The year before that, in 24, he was their bench coach. Best friends with Guardians manager Stephen Vogt, who had nothing but rave reviews for Albernaz. Vogt, of course, he led the Guardians to the postseason each of the last 2 years, following a 76-win 2023 season. Albernaz, prior to Cleveland, he was bullpen and catching coach for the San Francisco Giants from 2020 to 2023. He was with the Tampa Bay Rays organization prior to that. He was the short season Hudson Valley Renegades manager in 2017 when they won the New York Penn League title. And then in 2018, he was the high A Bowling Green Hot Rods manager in the Midwest League, where he won Manager of the Year. That's it. That's the extent of his managing career. My knee-jerk reaction when I saw this, I was like, another first-time manager after just firing your first-time manager who only managed in the minor leagues, was a bench coach. How is this not Brandon Hyde 2.0? And then I saw some instructional videos, some videos of him developing and instructing players, and just hearing him talk about the game of baseball, hearing what other pundits around the league are saying about him. I feel like this is a good hire for the Orioles.
It's funny. My immediate reaction was I thought you weren't supposed to hire managers during the World Series. That was my immediate reaction. I thought we were going to be waiting for a while for this, so it kind of caught me off guard that the Orioles went ahead and made the move to sign a manager. I hear you on the Brandon Hyde 2.0 thing. I get that. I tend to not worry too much about experience when it comes to managers, because I think there's so many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to these decisions that there's going to be a lot of support no matter what. It's not really, I know that experience, I think, was where we thought the Orioles were going to be going with this hire. We thought that they were going to be hiring somebody who could come in and I guess be a little bit more of an ass kicker in the clubhouse. I'm not so sure we're going to get that with Albernaz. I don't know. I think that's the part that is the biggest mystery, is that we just don't know what kind of manager he's going to be, because he hasn't been one before. And I think that that's okay. I think it's okay to let him grow into the role to some extent. He's got a lot of pieces to work with, obviously, on this roster, and a lot of guys who I think need somebody who is perhaps a little bit younger, can relate, and rather than a guy who's been around the block and has all the experience. It's a delicate balance you have to strike with a manager in baseball these days. You either have to have a guy who can just be there and be there as a sounding board for the players, which is hopefully what Albernaz can do, or you have to have a guy who runs the entire show. And those types of managers, the Bruce Bochy's of the world, let's say, are falling out of favor more and more as we see. There are fewer of those older types who have done it, have a proven track record. There's fewer of those types of managers around these days. So the Orioles going in this direction, like I said, it didn't really surprise me other than the timing of it. I was really, really surprised to hear Camden Yards come out of the man's mouth, because boy, that is a heavy accent that folks are going to have to get over to some extent. But Boston accent aside, I'm excited about the direction and hopeful about where the Orioles are heading for 2026.
And maybe it's just me, but for something about that Boston accent makes me think that his baseball acumen is just that much better than everybody else's. I don't know what it is about that accent.
I don't either, but there is something about it where you're just like, okay, he's coming in with some kind of a personality, that. Like he's not a dullard, which I think is you don't want a guy who's just going to sit there and answer the questions in a clean and polished way. You want somebody with a little bit of personality, and it appears so far that the Orioles have maybe found that.
Yeah, and I that's one thing I do like, is because how many times would they pan over to Brandon Hyde in the game and you just see him looking like a sad bulldog, just sitting in the mouth droop, the eyes droop, just looking like somebody kicked his puppy, and whether the team was winning or losing it. So I like the idea that this guy seems to have a fun personality, seems like a baseball lifer. Look, the hiring, it makes sense because look, the Orioles are coming off a very disappointing season, and yes, there were a lot of injuries, but there was also regression across the board for this team. A lot of young core players that you expect to take that next step year after year who took a step backwards for the team. And he has a history of developing players. He's worked with young players. He has experience. I mean, coming from Tampa Bay and San Francisco and Cleveland, I mean, I think those are three franchises that everybody holds in very high regard when it comes to developing players and getting the most bang for your buck. Because we expect the Orioles to spend a lot of spend a lot of money this offseason. They're not going to swim in the waters of a Kyle Tucker or a Kyle Schwarber or maybe even a Pete Alonso, right? But so they're going to have to lean on the players that they already have in house that they still have to develop, and then supplement this roster with some key players who will fill meaningful roles for this team. So to bring in somebody who comes from organizations that have a history of doing just that, I think is very important. For Albernaz. Mike Elias said he believes Albernaz is the right person at the right time to lead the team back toward playoff contention and a World Series. Second manager hired by Mike Elias, unless you count Tony Mansolino being given that interim tag. Were you surprised at all that Mansolino wasn't a firmer candidate for this position? Because they said he was going to get interviewed. I don't think he ever had a fighting chance to be the next manager for this ball club.
No, I don't think he was an actual serious candidate for the role. I know there were people that saw the record after he took over and thought that was worth something. I kind of thought that when Brandon Hyde was fired from this club, that was them saying that this wasn't going to be the season for us, which I think is a fair assessment, and it certainly was not. I think the thing about the Albernaz hiring that is really highlighted for me is that this is a Mike Elias ball club.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure is not going to be on Albernaz to have this team perform right off the bat. It's going to be on Mike Elias to have this team perform right off the bat, because the pieces, as you mentioned, are there. They just had not performed to the best of their ability over the last year. And
right.
Sure, Albernaz is going to certainly have a hand in trying to get those players to accomplish that, to grow and to become, the players that we think they are potential wise. But it's also going to be on Mike Elias to surround this current group with, as you said, other players, supplementary pieces over this offseason, and to build a team that can compete now. If it starts to turn poorly, let's say in the first half of next season, I think that light is going to shine much more heavily on Mike Elias than it is on Albernaz in this situation. And I think that's kind of the overwhelming take that I have on the Albernaz hiring, is that Albernaz, as a first-year manager, is not going to get the heat that a more experienced guy coming in would. So I think that's a real key, and I think that Mike Elias has potentially set himself up for, I don't want to say disaster, but if things don't, the Orioles want them to in 2026, that could be real trouble, because the team has to be constructed in such a way that Craig Albernaz can come in and hit the ground running with this young core that we all think is going to be something. And you mentioned it. There were many candidates. I think Adley Rutschman among them, leading the way, who underperformed in 2025. So unless you can get that kind of performance to turn around, I don't see how the Orioles are going to improve. It's not going to take just hiring a new young manager. It's going to take everything else and everybody rowing in the same direction.
Well, and then it starts with, in my opinion, you hired your manager. You've got to get your coaching staff in place, right? And we already know that Tony Sanders is been set free to explore other coaching opportunities outside the organization. We know that Robinson Chirinos is not going to be back. He's looking for a new opportunity. We know Shamar Johnson and Tommy Joseph, the two assistant hitting coaches. They're Shamar Johnson took another job. I can't remember where he went. I feel like it might be the White Sox, but he's left the organization. Tommy Joseph isn't coming back. I can't imagine that Cody Ashe will return as a hitting coach because the offensive struggles the last year and a half have been well documented. But they haven't announced that he has been dismissed at this point. I think it would be foolish to assume that a manager gets to pick his entire coaching staff this day and age. But how much of an input do you think Albernaz will have on who is on his coaching staff, and how much do you think it's going to be? How many of these guys that are already here stay here? What is your anticipation for what happens with the Orioles coaching staff?
Well, again, I think that's a much broader question that speaks to how much influence does a manager have in the game at all? How much is it tied to the general manager or vice president of baseball operations, whatever we want to call, the man running things? And I think that there's a balance to be struck there. You certainly want to have a distinct on-field presence and off-field presence but I think the more and more we see, not just within the Orioles, but throughout all of baseball, those things are becoming more and more intertwined. So I do think there needs to be a little bit of connectivity there between, what's going on in the front office and what's going on in the dugout. So I certainly don't think that Albernaz is going to have just full reign of his entire staff. But to an extent, you want to have a guy be comfortable, especially coming into a new role for the first time. You certainly want to have him have some of his guys around. And I think that will happen to an extent. It's going to be a matter of who he can convince to join him, whether it be from the Guardians or from some of his other stops throughout his career to this point. I do think that a lot of that is less important than fans want to make it out to be to some extent. When we get into talk about hitting coaches and associate managers and bench coaches, the players have to go out and perform. Like, that's the bottom line. Right. The players have to go out and, we just talked about it with this World Series, how many different moments there were and players stepping up to make plays. A baseball season is obviously long. You have to do that over the course of 162 and then into October. And getting the players that can do that on an in and out basis is the key to this whole thing. It's not going to be sure, the lessons that are learned throughout February and March translate into the rest of the year, and the coaching staff is a big part of that. But it comes down to getting the players. And so far, the Orioles have not shown that they have the players. They don't have the horses at the back at this point to compete. They showed that this season. If they can improve in that respect, it's going to make Craig Albernaz's job and his staff much easier.
Yeah, and you said it. It really comes down to the players and who's going to be on the field for the Orioles, who's going to be helping this team take that next step forward. Because you can have the greatest manager in the world, the greatest coaching staff in the world, the greatest front office in the world. If you don't have the players to get it done, you're not going to win many ball games. And we've got some important dates coming up that's going to be part of it. That's going to show us what kind of players the Orioles can be expecting to bring in. Free agency starts on Thursday. Right, where the Orioles can finally start to talk to players outside of the organization. They have this window right now to, talk to their own free agents. But beginning on Thursday, which is November 6th, they can start talking to free agents from other organizations and start supplementing their roster here. Then a month after that, the following Monday, you have the GM meetings. From November 10th to the 13th. Then you have a month after that, December 7th to the 10th, you have the winter meetings in Orlando. And then after that, you have 2 months until spring training starts. This offseason is going to move fast, and we're going to be in Sarasota before you know it. The Orioles have a lot of work to do. And with that in mind, we're going to start with their arbitration-eligible players. They've signed right-handed pitcher Rico Garcia and infielder Luis Vasquez to 1-year Major League contracts for 2026, avoiding arbitration with them. They still have to make tender contracts to Ryan Mountcastle, Keegan Aiken, Dylan Carlson, Trevor Rogers, Tyler Wells, Jose Castillo, Dean Kramer, Adley Rutschman, Felix Bautista, Kyle Bradish, Yennier Cano, Gunnar Henderson, Alex Jackson, and Albert Suarez. I mean, that is a lot of names that they have to tender contracts to. So let's start with the guys that we think are obviously not going to be tender contracts. Is there anybody that stands out on this list as somebody that you're obviously not tendering a contract to?
Well, I think the biggest question that I think needs to be answered is, what are you doing with Ryan Mountcastle? Because he seems to be the player that has been, I hate to say hanging on for the longest from, I guess, the previous iteration of the Orioles, but you see roster churn throughout baseball, and you also see hangers on. And Ryan Mountcastle at this point feels like a guy that's been hanging on. There's obviously been injury issues. There's been slump issues. There's been a lot going on there. But I just want to see what they're going to do there, because there's not a lot of great answers beyond Ryan Mountcastle for who's your bat. and that's, I think, the biggest problem with this team. There's a lot of roster issues with the Orioles right now, but who's the big thumper in the middle is I think one of the biggest questions that I have. And if it's not going to be Ryan Mountcastle, which I don't think you or I believe that it is long term, what are we doing here? There's obvious names on there that are sticking around.
Yeah.
Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Dean Kramer, names like that are obviously sticking around going forward. It's just a matter of, what are the chess moves here that the Orioles front office has in order to not only build for 2026, but continue to build on it? We saw the contract that was given out to Samuel Basallo toward the end of the season. Is there another long-term deal coming for a player, or are we just going to keep stringing this along and seeing what we have for the next season or two and kind of go from there? That's the part that I'm interested in, because we've seen the way that successful teams have built their rosters over the last few years. It's getting those players locked down to long-term deals like the Orioles just did with Basallo. Is it too late to do it with some of these other, players who we think are pieces for the long term? I'm not sure, but like you said, the biggest question to me are, what are you doing with a player like Ryan Mountcastle? There's a few other names on that list that are of his ilk as well. Guys who you think could be a part, but do they need to be a part? There's some trimming that needs to happen here for sure.
Well, and somebody that's actually not on this list that I didn't even realize isn't on this list is Jorge Mateo. Are you tending? I got this from MLB Trade Rumors, and they don't have Jorge Mateo listed on there. I think he's due something like $5.5 million in arbitration this year. I don't think you can give him that kind of money. I think he's a non-tender candidate. We can talk about that in a little bit if you want to. But Ryan Mountcastle, beyond the bat, this team was so fundamentally poor at baseball this year. Whether it's just errors, typical baseball errors, or mental errors, like throwing to the wrong base, overthrowing your cutoff man, a terrible throw from the outfield. This team needs to shore things up defensively. They need to know what base they're throwing to at all times. They need to catch the ball, throw the ball successfully more often than not. They need to make their money fielding the baseball. And with that in mind, I don't know that you have a first baseman that can fill the shoes of Ryan Mountcastle defensively, which 4 years ago would have been a crazy thing to fathom. But now you look at it, he's one of the better fielding first basemen in the American League. Are you handing that job over to Kobe Mayo? Are you handing it over to Samuel Basallo or Adley Rutschman? I don't believe you have a first baseman that you can trust defensively, which might be the main reason that Ryan Mountcastle sticks around, if he does stick around.
Well, and you have to account too, though, for injury history, number one.
Yeah.
But you also have to account for the fact that your first baseman needs to be a bat. And is Ryan Mountcastle a bat? Is he, frankly, is Adley Rutschman a bat at this point? Is Kobe Mayo a bat at this point? I think it's way too early to say, is Samuel Basallo a bat? I think we all believe that he can be a bat. But the questions about who's going to be the bat in this lineup, I mean, obviously we expect Gunnar Henderson to pick up where he left off. I think he had a down season for his expectation, but there were still inklings that he is Gunnar Henderson after all last season. I think that you expect improvement out of players like that, but who is the main guy? Who's the dude in this lineup?
Right.
I don't think it's Ryan Mountcastle. So who is it? And I think you want your first baseman to be a bat. Obviously the defense is a plus as well. But I think there are a lot more questions than answers within this roster with players like that and positions like that. Center field is another one. We talk about, what is Colton Cowser after the departure of Cedric Mullins? Is Colton Cowser going to be a guy that sticks? There's a lot of these younger players who we think are guys, but we haven't gotten the full picture because they either haven't all been healthy at the same time or haven't all been performing at the same time. So it's going to be important for not only for Craig Albernaz, but for Mike Elias to put a team around that can all gel together. I just think there's a lot of different little spots on this roster where you can see, no, we should move on there. We should try to add here. We can stick with what we have here. But where those answers are coming from, is it free agency? Is it via trade? You just don't know at this point. And that's the part that going into this offseason for me is, it's exciting to some extent because you don't really know what's going to happen, but it's a little scary too because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. And you mentioned Colton Cowser, and a lot of people think that I hate Colton Cowser. And I do not. I do not hate Colton Cowser. But I think that we have to look at Colton Cowser realistically and put the fact that he's a fun last name aside, and the fact he's got a fun personality, put that aside, and look at what he does on the field. And what I see from somebody on the field is a player that has 300 strikeouts in what is this, 300 strikeouts in 245 games in his career. A guy who struck out 128 times in 327 at bats, 360 plate appearances. That is atrocious. And I understand it came out after the season ended that he played the second half of that season with broken ribs. I love that he's a gamer who went out there and he broke his ribs making a big catch in a big situation. I get that and I appreciate that, but he has built a career off of a series of hot streaks where mostly this is a player who has failed, save for 3 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 10 days here, right? So he's got light tower power. When he hits a home run, you know it's gone the second he hits it, right? But he also comes up and strikes out in big situations. He can't hit off speed to save his life. And now we have another excuse for him. His rookie year, it was, he was really great in April, and he had a really nice stretch in July or August. But it was his rookie year, so the strikeouts and all that, he's only going to get better. And I believed that. And then I watched him strike out 128 times in 360 plate appearances this past season, albeit with playing with a couple of broken ribs. That's the excuse now, is the broken ribs. What happens if Colton Cowser starts next season the same way, where we're through the month of April? He's got 75 at-bats under his belt, 100 at-bats under his belt, and he's got 50 strikeouts. What are we doing then? What are we talking about here?
Look, I'm kind of exactly where you are on Cowser. The first 2.5 months of his career when he came up were thrilling, and he was hitting the cover defense. You saw a lot of pieces of his game that you like, but then as happens in baseball, you start to get figured out and you have to make adjustments, and he's made adjustments here and there, but the overall picture I don't think has been completed on Colton Cowser. And there is a little bit of a awkwardness here because he's so likable. He seems like a good character, seems like a good clubhouse guy. As our buddy Glenn Clark likes to say, we all love Moo. We get it, but there does need to be more production there. I'm even more so than the bat. And look, I get that there are holes in his swing for sure, and they need to be cleaned up. I'm really interested to see what it looks like defensively more long-term in center field, and if that is a viable thing, because he's certainly not the defender that Cedric Mullins was. Right. And I think if he can get to 75-80% of that, I think you're good. I just don't know that he can get to that fully. I'm not 100% sold on him as the long-term center fielder for this team. Can you move him to a corner? Can he play in left? Maybe. We've seen him do that, but I think this team is going to probably rely on him unless something different happens, unless there's a big signing of some kind. I think they're going to rely on him to be the center fielder in 2026. And that I have questions. I think that coming into this season, this is the the season for him to start answering those questions. If they're not going to be answered this season, I'm not sure that they're going to be answered in the long term either. So it's a really, really crucial season for him. And it's a point of the roster that, at least you can maybe get an answer this season. I'm not 100% sure Orioles fans are going to like the answer, but you may at least get the answer this coming season with Colton Cowser.
Well, and I think that ideally, I agree with you. I think he's going to end up playing a lot of center field for the Orioles this year. And that's if the roster stays as current. We know they're going to add, but assuming that they don't add, an outfielder right now, he's going to be the center fielder by default. But I think ideally the Orioles want him playing left field. And I think ideally they want Dylan Beavers in right field with somebody else playing center field. And it was supposed to be Enrique Bradfield or Vance Honeycutt at this point. Honeycutt has not had a great start to his professional career. Bradfield, when he can stay on the field, is electric, and Bradfield could come in and play Gold Glove defense in center field for the Baltimore Orioles right now, but he has these soft tissue injuries to the hamstrings, to the quads, and his game is completely built upon his speed.
It's
his
speed,
leg. Yeah, and he's nothing if he can't utilize that speed, because he also can beat out ground balls in the infield using his speed. So he's got to prove that he can stay healthy. He's going to start the year in center field for AAA and get an opportunity at some point. Though, if you listen to him talk this offseason, he believes it's his job to lose in center field for the Orioles in 2026. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be Cowser in center field, unless they go out and they sign. They go out and they sign an outfielder. With that in mind, there's a couple out there. The big name, of course, is Kyle Tucker. The Orioles aren't swimming in those waters. They just aren't.
You wouldn't think so, no.
They're not going to give him 10, 12 years at $400 to $500 million. I can't imagine that they're going to do that. So the name that comes to mind for me is somebody I wanted to sign last year and the year before, and they didn't do it, and that's Cody Bellinger. I think Cody Bellinger is a player that he can fill a need at first base. He can fill a need at all three outfield positions. He's got a left-handed swing that's tailor-made for Camden Yards. He's a left-handed hitter that hits left-handed pitching. To me, Cody Bellinger makes too much sense not to do it. Your thoughts on the Orioles potentially adding somebody like a Cody Bellinger, who could be a Kyle Tucker light for this ball club?
I've always thought Cody Bellinger, you said it, his swing is tailor-made for Oriole Park at Camden Yards. That flag court, look out. I mean, that's exactly what you want frankly, in your first baseman or in a corner outfielder. I'm all on board for that signing. Whether or not we say that the Orioles are not going to be swimming in the Kyle Tucker waters. I don't think we know what the Orioles are going to be doing. And again, I go back to, I think that's what makes this offseason so exciting, but also terrifying, is because we don't know, this new ownership group has now been in place for a season and a half, 2 seasons. Like, they're starting to get their foothold. We don't really know what is in the quote unquote war chest to be able to spend. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it. Cody Bellinger, totally on board. I'm on board with any of these names that are out there that are big names that could be splashy signings. That does not include the likes of Tyler O'Neill. That's not what they made last season. It needs to be of higher quality than that, obviously. So I'm obviously 2 thumbs up. I don't know what exactly the ownership group is ready and willing to jump in on, and what they're ready and willing to spend, because baseball players cost money. That's just the bottom line. It's a very unique sport in that you have to go out and pay the price if you want the player on your team. And the teams that we see do that are the teams that we see competing in October every year. And we see teams make runs, but overall, you got to spend money if you want to be at the big boy table. And hopefully the Orioles are willing to do that this offseason. And honestly, if they're not going to do it this season, I'm not sure what other season they would be waiting for, because we talked about kind of the young core that they have and the underperformance of it. Well, if you supplement that and hope to grow on, some of this young core and lift them up with some other guys around, this is certainly the offseason to do it in. And I think a guy like Bellinger, hell, even a guy like Tucker, any of these guys would certainly be welcome into this lineup.
If the Orioles somehow ended up with Kyle Tucker, I think we'd throw a parade just for the signing. It would be such a sign of it would be a turning point for this franchise to sign a guy like a Kyle Tucker. And you mentioned, you've got to pay the price if you want the player. You look at the two teams in the World Series. They have the two biggest contracts in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
You have $700 million Shohei Ohtani for the Dodgers and $500 million excluding Juan Soto here. So two of the three biggest contracts in the sport, $700 million for Ohtani, $500 million for Vladdy Jr. For the Blue Jays. Those are the two teams that are in the World Series. You've got to go out and spend the money.
Well, and you bring up Juan Soto too. The Mets are the perfect example of how that can go wrong as well. It's not just reliant upon go spend it all in one spot. You've got to build a team. So I get it if the Orioles can't go out and splash the cash for a Kyle Tucker, or we haven't even really mentioned the pitching, because that, of course, is depleted right now as well with all injuries and everything. Like, they're going to need to supplement that side of the ball as well. And if they can't go out and do that, they've got to spread it out and build an actual team to be able to go out and compete. And that's, I think they're, look, it's you can look at the standings and say they're a long way away from that, but I do think that there is a lot of work to be done this offseason in order to get them back to where they want to be.
Real quick before we get to the pitching side of things, and do you have to jump right at 11, or can you hang out a little bit after 11?
No, I've got a little bit of time after.
Okay, cool. Because I do want to talk about the pitching. I think we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't. But you mentioned Tyler O'Neill, and I want to discuss him briefly because he's going to opt in. He's got 2 years remaining at $17 million, just about $17 million a year. Terrible season for O'Neill. Spent the bulk of the season on the IL, and when he wasn't on the IL, he didn't perform. So he's going to be here. Do the Orioles? I think playing him in the outfield is a huge mistake. I think that he needs to be a full-time DH if you expect to keep him healthy and you want his bat to do the damage that you need it to do. But then it clogs up the DH hole when you have guys like Rutschman and Mayo and potentially Mountcastle and Basayo on your roster that you're going to want to use that DH slot for. What do the Orioles do with Tyler O'Neill in 2026, aside from hope he has a great start to the year and then trade him at the deadline?
I think Tyler O'Neill is not a player that you can rely on purely because of the health issue. I think you're going to have to play him in the spots that you can play him when he's healthy and kind of see where it goes otherwise. Obviously, like you said, he's going to opt into the contract. You're kind of stuck with that for another season. And I hate to say it like that. I'm not trying to make it seem like he's a burden on the roster, but this is the bed that they made, so they have to lie in it kind of situation. So when he's healthy, try and get the most out of him as possible, but you certainly cannot rely on him to be a bat in your lineup that's going to produce this season. You just have to kind of pick your spots for him.
Yeah, they're gonna have to find a place for him because he's going to be here. You don't want to. I want to be careful when I say this because you don't want to hope for injury for anybody. But I think the expectation is that he's probably not going to spend a lot of time in your lineup and on the field because he never does. He's played over 100 games twice in his career. In both those years, he hit over 30 home runs. But, I mean, we're talking about 8 big league seasons. He's done it twice, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's the same for me. I swear I'm not trying to just transition us to the pitching side, but it's the same with a lot of these pitchers who have come back from injuries. Anything you get from them is a bonus to me. And I kind of feel a little bit similarly about Tyler O'Neill. If you get production out of him when he is healthy, I think you have to consider that a bonus additive thing. Anything else is just, you're not expecting much out of it. And I think that the same is the case for me, at least with a lot of these pitchers who have been hurt. Anything you get out of them coming back from injury is looked at to me as a bonus.
Right. No, I 100% agree with you with regards to that. Today's show brought to you by Glenn Clark Radio. If you missed anything from Glenn Clark Radio this week, including inside information on Craig Albernaz from Guardians Hall of Fame play-by-play voice Tom Hamilton and former MLB catcher Kurt Cavalli, who played for him in San Francisco, you can find that and more in the Glenn Clark Radio Week in Review feature at PressBoxOnline.com. And as always, watch or listen to GCR every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. at PressBoxOnline.com/radio or right here on PressBox's Facebook and YouTube pages. Let's talk about the pitching here, Andrew. some arbitration eligible guys that are going to be dependent on by the Orioles. Obviously, you're picking up the $5.1 million contract for Dean Kramer or something close to that. $2.8 million for Kyle Bradish. So these are all projected salaries. $2.7 million for Tyler Wells. The Orioles are going to depend on Kyle Bradish being an ace. They're going to depend on Trevor Rogers, $6 million for Trevor Rogers. They're going to depend on Trevor Rogers being an ace-like pitcher. What he did last year, I don't think he's going to replicate. But if you get 3.5 ERA out of Trevor Rogers in 2026, you sign up for that in blood. Then you got Dean Kramer, who, man, sometimes he looks like a number 2, and sometimes he looks like a 4A pitcher. I think he's a solid number 5 for your rotation, but he's got to be a number 5 for your rotation. He can't be a number 3, right? Ideally, Trevor Rogers is a number 3. Grayson Rodriguez is number 4, but then that goes back to what you're talking about with the injuries. Anything you get out of him is a bonus because until he posts up for a full season, you can't expect that he's going to do that. The Orioles need to add to this rotation. The big name that's out there is Framber Valdez. The character issues notwithstanding, you're probably $30 million a year for a guy.
Oh yeah, I'd say at least for sure.
Do you think it's more likely that the Orioles go and make a signing like that, or maybe they sign a lesser Dylan Cease, or do you think it's something that maybe they trade for a Joe Ryan or a Mackenzie Gore?
I certainly think that's more likely to come through the trade market than the big splash in free agency when it comes to the Orioles. But all those names you mentioned, and I'll even include Trevor Rogers in this, because as great as he was last season, he was great for 2/3 of the season, maybe half of the season because of injury issues. So
right.
we're seeing, and look, this is a problem throughout the game, is the arm injuries, obviously. You have to have almost 2 rotations because you're going to face arm injuries with starting pitchers, with relievers, all of the above. So I just think you have to kind of go into the pitching mindset as almost quantity, but throw in the quality, but you need the quantity for sure. And I think that's where the Orioles are certainly lacking due to the injuries that they already have. So they'll definitely need to sign a few pitchers. That's why I don't particularly see them making the big splash in free agent for one big name pitcher. I think they're going to have to go out and get 2 or 3 guys that they can hopefully stick into a rotation and go from there.
Something that's interesting to me is the idea of, and nobody said this, it's in my brain. I posted yesterday, knowing that Max Scherzer was pitching Game 7, that I thought we might get a Scherzer-esque performance. And if he goes out there and he shoves like the Max Scherzer of old and helps them win that World Series, does he go out on top? He said after the game he can't imagine that that's the last pitch that he's thrown in his big league career. Can you see the Orioles taking a flyer on a season of Max Scherzer, come in there, show these young guys that bulldog mentality on the mound, that you're taking that ball every 5th day and you're going out there and you're going to have to kill me to get me off of this mound? Can you see the Orioles taking and I think that that's a more impactful signing than a Charlie Morton. The difference being that this past offseason, the signings of Sagano and Charlie Morton were the signings. Whereas I would think that a signing of a Max Scherzer this year would have to be an additional signing to the big name pitcher, and he's somebody that you bring in, even if he comes in spring training and it becomes evident that he's not going to have a spot. And you can work out a trade or a release or something like that. Can you see the Orioles taking a flyer on a veteran pitcher of the ilk of a Max Scherzer or Max Scherzer himself to move into 2026?
Well, I would have loved to see something like that last season. And I don't think there's, look, you can look at the Charlie Morton versus Max Scherzer signings last season and think, why did we do A instead of doing B?
Mm-hmm.
I certainly think that would be O. Look, Scherzer is obviously at such an advanced age that you cannot rely on a guy like that to be Max Scherzer of old. You have to factor in time off, injuries, all of those things. But yeah, to have a guy like that in the clubhouse to be a veteran leader, sure, I'm all on board with that. It's just not a road that I know that the Orioles are going to go down just because there's so many other it's like what we talk about in any offseason. There are so many holes to fill that when you start filling one, you're going to have to leave a little bit to be desired in another. So I'm not 100% sure that that's the route they go, but it's certainly not a route that I would be opposed to them.
Oh, for sure. And it's just a thought that popped into my head after reading the comment from him last night. Obviously, I want the Orioles to go out there and sign a big name player, trade for a big name pitcher. And if they were to add a Scherzer later, that would be the only way that I would be okay with that. Is if he's added later, not somebody that he's the first big signing that you make. Tyler Wells at the end of season presser, Michael Elias today envisioned Tyler Wells as a starter in 2026. I think that's a mistake. And I can appreciate saying that and building him up as a starter in spring training, but I think that you are robbing Peter to pay Paul if you do that. I think that he has to be in your bullpen because I think that you've got to add 4 arms minimum to your bullpen this year, and that's if you already have Tyler Wells in there, right? So I think having Tyler Wells pitch out of the bullpen is the way the Orioles should go. Do you think it was all lip service from Elias, or do you really think he's going to get a shot at the rotation in 2026?
I think deep down, every major league organ, every pitcher as a starting pitcher, because starting pitching is so valuable, and they need every team needs starting pitching. Whereas you can find bullpen arms, you can find these guys that are throwing 100 miles an hour. We see it all the time. So I think they would like to envision Tyler Wells as a potential starter, but I agree with you. I think his long-term success will come in the bullpen. Could be wrong about that, but that's just the way that I see it. And I think the Orioles will eventually see that as well. You want to give a guy every chance he can to be a starter, and we'll see what comes of that. But I agree with you. I think his success will likely come in the pen.
But yeah, a lot of question marks for this team moving forward. What do you do with Grayson Rodriguez? Is he gonna stay healthy? What do you do with Tyler Wells? Who do you bring in to fortify this rotation, to fortify this bullpen? There's a lot of moves that this team has to make. It's like you said at the beginning of the program, hiring a new manager is step one, but it doesn't just suddenly make this team a playoff contender, right? You've got to add the right pieces to get back into contention. I think that we all believe that this team with the core that they have, and I hate overusing that term, but it's the core that they have. I believe that they are not far away from being a playoff and World Series contender. It all amounts to the moves that they make. So if Andrew Stetka is running the Orioles heading into 2026, who are you signing for this rotation? I won't make you do the bullpen, but for this rotation and for this lineup to get the Orioles over the hump, who are you bringing in?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't have individual names for you. I haven't dove. Look, we're one day post the World Series, obviously.
Sure,
I haven't dove completely into the free agent lists, but I just think that this team needs, as I said earlier, it needs quality for sure, but it needs quantity as well. It needs to make multiple moves in order to not only fill in the rotation. It needs a bopper in the middle of the lineup, whether that's a first baseman, whether that's an outfielder. There are so many different wheels in motion with this team between the young players and the kind of veteran hangers on, if you will, some of whom we've already discussed here this morning. I just think that there's a lot of work to be done. And yes, the manager was the first step in knocking that out, and they've accomplished that. But now that, as you say, free agency starts within a week here, it's time to get rolling and time to really put the microscope on Mike Elias and this entire organization and see, okay, you had success over a massive speed bump in 2025. How do you recover from that? And how do you supplement this roster, which we all think can be good? It just underperformed to massive degrees in 2025. How do you supplement that going forward? And how do you kind of right the ship? Because I agree with you. I don't think this team is very far off. I think it needs some signings to be made and perhaps some trades to remove some players from the roster where at all possible. But I think it's going to come mostly through the free agents and mostly through, honestly, guys just progressing to the mean rather than regressing to the mean, because we saw a lot of underperformance within this team. And I think that as long as that starts to right itself a little bit here going forward, I think the Orioles could be a playoff team as early, once again, as 2026. I think they could even contend for the division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'll tell you, if you start seeing names come off the board and the Orioles and Orioles fans feel like the Orioles are sitting on their hands, like if we get to the winter meetings and we've seen some names get signed heading into the winter meetings and the Orioles haven't done anything, this fan base is going to lose their minds. Do you agree that they have to? Well, maybe not. I don't want to say agree. Do you believe that the Orioles have to act quickly once free agency begins?
I think they have to act correctly rather than quickly.
Right.
I don't think it has to be. I don't think they have to just make the first signing or the second signing to be the team jumping out in there. I think it has to be the right guys for the right moment. I think that's the most crucial part. I don't think that, I said they need quantity too. They need the quality for sure, but they don't need to just sign guys to sign guys either.
Right.
There needs to be a fit. There needs to be a plan in place. And again, it's hard to mesh that with so many of and not fully knowing what to expect from them going forward. We talked about Cowser, Samuel Basayo. Are we going to see a bounce back from Adley Rutschman? Jordan Westberg stay on the field long term? There's a lot of different names out there that you want to see them take that next step. And how can Mike Elias supplement the roster in order to help those guys do that? That's the biggest question for me this offseason.
For sure. Today's show brought to you by the latest edition of PressBox print issue, which is available now. On the cover, Don Marcus learns more about new Maryland Athletic Director Jim Smith and the unique background he brings to the job. Also inside, we profile college basketball players from the teams all across the state. You can find the new issue for free all throughout the region, including now at all Baltimore area High's Dairy stores, or you can read the entire issue at PressBoxOnline.com. Today's show also brought to you by County Sports Zone. We're headed towards championship season in fall high school sports, and all year long you can find scores, schedules, and updates for every sport and every school all throughout the state at countysports.zone. Countysports.zone is proudly sponsored by your local Toyota dealer and buyatoyota.com. Andrew, before we get you out of here, just a couple of fan interaction that we want to get to. World's Worst Gamer says, I came in for World Series talk. Hope to hear a Jays fan crying. We don't get a lot of opposing teams fans that tune into this show. The first 25, 30 minutes of the show was all World Series. So you missed us talking about just an epic World Series, an all-timer between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. Adit wants to know, who's the most realistic big name you think they will target? He thinks Cease or maybe Valdez.
I think there's a possibility on Cease. I certainly wouldn't rule that out. Valdez, I think, might be shooting a little bit high. But look, man, that's, again, you got to find the right guys for the right moment. And it doesn't just mean going and paying top dollar for the top pitcher on the market. We haven't really seen the Orioles do that in their history. I don't expect that to change, but it's the right guy for the right moment. So certainly one of those guys could be in the cards, but we'll just have to see it all play out.
I think that it's we're not really going to know until they make a signing. I think they're going to be linked to just about everybody. They're going to be linked to Pete Alonso for obvious reasons. They're going to be linked to Kyle Tucker for obvious reasons. I think the most realistic big name that they target is Cody Bellinger. I think he makes so much sense for this team. I think he is the most realistic target, and I think there will be a lot of truth to rumors of the Orioles going after Cody Bellinger this offseason. I think that's the big name, and I think that they'll end up trading for their top of the rotation starter. D also says Kazuma Okamoto is someone I think they could target first base, third base, outfield out of Japan that hits better, high velocity, and better approach than Murakami. I don't know anything about Okamoto. Murakami's the guy that strikes out a ton but has like a crazy amount of power, right? Yeah, so I don't know much about these guys other than that. We'll see. I don't think that the Orioles are going to be targeting anybody from the Japanese market unless it's somebody like a supplemental piece. I don't think it's going to be
a lesser known guy for sure.
Yeah. James Reckling, Scherzer had a recent injury history, unlike Morton. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't even on the division series roster. We get it. We get that there are limitations, but Scherzer's also you're not going to put Max Scherzer in the same category as Charlie Morton either in terms of
he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a first ballot. He's Max Scherzer. James also said that Tyler Wells won't last a season if he is a starter, and there's a lot of truth to that because he's been a starter his whole career and he's never pitched a full season at the big league level as a starter. So that's 100% true. James also says he wants Michael King. Well, he's got a club option, I believe, with the Padres here.
And you want to talk about an injury history?
Yeah, for sure. You're going to have to trade for a Michael King, if that's the route you want to go. Adit, I could see 40 to 45 million a year for someone like Fromber, or on 1 to 2 years less, given what they offered Burns last year, what Houston offered starters in the past. Andrew, I'm not a big contract guy. Like, I don't know what it's going to take to get these guys signed. It's going to take a lot of money to get Fromber, and you're going to have to outbid a lot of teams that probably have a lot more money than you do. Yeah. That are more willing to spend it than you. And like you said, we don't know what they have in their war chest. We don't know how much money ownership is willing to spend. We hope it's a lot, but we just don't know if they're going to be playing on the same field as these other teams.
No, and you have to also fight the fact that, are you going to want to pitch in Baltimore, or are you going to want to pitch in places like Arizona, like Corbin Burns decided last year? Like, there are other mitigating factors. It's not just money. You have to have the right fit for an individual player to sign him. We'll see, what the Orioles are able to come up with. It's not all about dollar amount at all times, though. We learned that last offseason.
For sure. And then finally, hopefully Elias has learned that using launch angle swings on every player ruins them and stops it. Look, they're going to have to improve their hitting approach. I think we all agree with that. What they've done offensively the last year and a half has not been acceptable. This was a team that got shut out, 16, 17 times this season. They scored less than 3 runs in more than half of their game. They scored 3 runs or less than, I think, more than half of their games this past year. They absolutely need to improve their offensive approach, whether they keep Kobayashi, which I hope they don't, but whether they keep him or they bring in somebody new, the approach has got to change. But it falls as much on the players as it does, if not more, as it does on the coaching staff, because it's up to the players to go out there and get the job done. And like I said, regression across the board. Some of that's on coaching. A lot of his own players trying to do too much. I think this entire team could use a little bit of maturing when it comes to their offensive approach.
Well, and that's just going to be the case when you have a young team like the Orioles do. They have that young core, and like I said, you got to sprinkle that with some veteran leadership now, and now's the offseason to do it, because if not now, when is my question.
Little Incubus song. Maybe, I don't know if you were going for that reference, but
I wasn't, but it works that way too.
Yeah, if not now, when? Andrew, this was awesome. Thank you so much for doing our first off-season show with me. Appreciate you doing it. And on short notice, thank you for that. Do you have anything you want to plug, anything you want to add before we get you out of here?
Man, folks can follow me at Stetka on the socials. I'm not super active anymore on social media, just because social media is what it is these days, but you can follow me there. I do a little soccer podcast on the side as well for any soccer fans out there. I'm a big Tottenham Hotspur fan, so the Tottenham Depot is where you can find me most weeks. In fact, we're getting ready to record one here in about a half an hour, so you can check me out there. That's where I am mostly, and like you mentioned earlier, at game day as well with Glenn every week to talk some Ravens. So we'll be there as well.
Awesome. Andrew, this was great. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Without you, we don't have a show. Thank you to all of our loyal listeners, fans, and viewers. Without you, we 100% do not have a show. Not sure when the next show is going to be, but if the Orioles do something, you'll be hearing from us. Until then, see ya.